Ronald the Rules Lawyer. My coverage of the 8 remastered classes in Player Core 2 continues today. Next in the alphabet is the Champion. I'll cover the changes to its class features and its subclasses, which have been hugely impacted by the removal of alignment in the remaster. But first, to introduce myself, I am a lawyer who runs tabletop role-playing games. My preferred system is Pathfinder 2e. I ran an after-school, middle-school RPG class for several years. Support my Patreon if you haven't already. It allows me to continue making videos. I don't make money as an attorney. For more info on that, look at this video. Supporting my Patreon gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. The Champion is our tanky martial class with a holy connection, or unholy. The benevolent ones are great at protecting allies, while the malevolent ones are great at being selfish and also punishing their foes. The big news is that alignment is gone in the remaster, which determined what your subclass was in the previous Champion. So what does that mean for the class? Well, I think overall it means more thematic and mechanical flexibility with your Champion. Those of you who have been following my remaster coverage know it's been a very busy month. I'm not going to be as in-depth as I was with The Alchemist. I'm only going to be covering things that changed and focusing on the class features and subclasses. But that's quite a bit, so let's get started. The subclass for the Champion is called your cause. It gives you your Champion's reaction, which is a defining mechanic for you, and determines your edicts and anathema. Before, your alignment determined which of these causes you had. Now you no longer have an alignment. What you can see now is that some of them require that you be unholy and others require that you be holy. The rest don't require either. You can become holy or unholy at level 1 as a Champion through your class feature called Sanctification. Sanctification is basically committing yourself to one side of the holy war. You become more effective against those of the opposite side and also make yourself more exposed to them as well. But you can't simply choose which way you swing. It all depends on what deity you worship, and all of the deities in the Player Core book have an entry that looks like one of these. Here is Sarenrae, the goddess of redemption, and Iomedae, the goddess of waging holy war against the undead and against evil. Some deities say you may be holy or may be unholy. Other deities say you must be one of them. And there are even other deities that say you cannot be either of them. You look at the divine sanctification line in the deity's entry. Worshipping the goddess of redemption says you may choose to be holy. Worshipping the goddess of the holy war requires you to sanctify as holy. Your sanctification choice, in addition to determining which of these subclasses you can choose from, also can give the holy or unholy trait to all of your strikes that you make as a Champion. This is a buff to the Remastered Champion because it can trigger damage weaknesses in certain enemies. The book also gives tables warning that being unholy and its accompanying edicts can be extremely disruptive to a typical game, and so being unholy is an uncommon option for player characters. Your deity also determines which focus spells you may choose from at level 1. At level 1, you get a replenishable focus spell that is another defining action of your character. We have the classic Lay on Hands, which can heal and protect the living and do damage to the undead. We also have its opposite called Touch of the Void, and we have something else that is different entirely called Shields of the Spirit, which I'll describe soon. The divide between the living and the undead is called Vitality and Void. This is different from the dichotomy between holy and unholy. I made a video that you may want to watch that explains these two things and also explains spirit damage in the remaster. So let's wrap all of this up and look at a couple of more deities. Lamashtu is the mother of monsters. If you're a Champion of Lamashtu, you may choose to sanctify yourself as unholy. Which of these devotion spells you can choose depends on this line here called Divine Font, which for clerics determines whether their class feature can consist of the harm or the heal spell. Well, since Lamashtu can be either, that means you can be an unholy Champion of evil and also be committed to casting Lay on Hands and supporting the living and opposing the undead, which is kind of thematic given that Lamashtu is a mother who creates life. Another deity is Gozre, the indifferent god of nature. You are forbidden from sanctifying yourself at all, and Because their divine font is only heal, you may only choose Lay on Hands or Shields of the Spirit, which again is available to all champions. Now let's look at Shields of the Spirit. It is basically a defender focus spell. You must be wielding a shield, and you spend 1 action to raise your shield, and you give all allies within your champion's aura, which we'll get to in a minute, a +1 status bonus to armor class. That's a pretty valuable buff. You don't often get status bonuses to your armor class in this game. And in addition, every time an enemy makes an attack against one of your allies within your aura, they take spirit damage, even if it misses. The enemy does not need to be within your aura. And it's not clear to me whether attack also includes attacks that call for a saving throw. I think it does. I'm bound to get some things wrong in this video. Look in my pinned comment below for additions and errata, by the way. This benefit lasts until the start of your next turn or until you're no longer raising your shield, whichever comes first. Meanwhile, it does not look like you can have more than one of these level 1 champion focus spells. You commit yourself to one, and this admittedly has stiff competition against Lay on Hands. Also, the anathema that champions have to avoid committing to avoid losing their champion powers have been loosened up a bit. First of all, those associated with alignment are gone because alignment is gone. Also, whereas before it said if you stray from your alignment or violate your code of conduct, you lose your powers, now it says it happens if you perform enough acts that are anathema to your deity. So there's that language, enough acts. It looks like by rule, you can get away with one thing at least. However, it is up to discretion. The word enough is non-specific. So if your holy champion murders an innocent child for the pleasure of it, your GM probably should make you lose your powers. Next, we have a class feature that is called the Champion's Aura. It's basically a radius in which you can use your champion powers, basically, including your champion's reaction. This also means that this aura can be expanded later on, and you can do that with this level 6 feat called Expand Aura, which doubles the radius to 30 feet. It expands it until the start of your next turn, but when you get to higher level, it becomes 1 minute, and eventually until you dismiss it. Also, there's this cool part where it says any follower of your deity immediately knows you are a champion of that deity when they are in your aura. A nice way to immediately get authority with your fellow worshippers. We have big changes to your level 3 class feature, which was previously called Divine Ally, the one that gave you a holy or unholy mount, or weapon, or shield. It's been renamed Blessing of the Devoted, probably because one of the new ones does not involve a thing. Having a mount is not one of the options anymore, but that is because you can get a mount with a level 1 feat in the Remastered Champion, which is nice. You don't have to wait until level 3 to get something that defines your character. The weapon option also no longer cares whether you are a good or evil champion, because again, there is no alignment. However, as a GM, I probably would not allow a champion who worships a deity that does not allow the heal font to add the vitalizing property to their weapon. But we have a significant change to the shield ally. Whereas before it increased the hardness of your shield by 2 and increased its hit points by 50%, now we get basically auto-scaling of your shield as if it had reinforcing runes. Champions who took the shield ally probably were already getting those reinforcing runes already or getting sturdy shields already. This basically means that it saves them money now. If you do pay for these upgrades, however, the shield's hardness increases by 1. So for shield champions, basically the benefit has gone from hardness increase from 2 to hardness increase of 1. And also you lose a plus 50% to the hit points. Or you can alternatively choose to spend your money elsewhere, because all you'd be paying for is this hardness increase of 1. Most shield champion players will see this as a nerf because they probably were just trying to mathematically enhance their shield as much as possible. I will say, though, from the campaigns I've seen shield champions in action, that they were quite strong. Their shields basically never were in danger of being broken even. There's maybe one instance after 4 years of GMing I've seen. And then we have a new option called Blessed Swiftness. This gives you a plus 5 foot status bonus to your speed, which, by the way, is another reason why I think the Tailwind spell is a terrible spell. If you're mounted, your mount gains this bonus instead. You also protect your allies who are within your shield's aura, who move and provoke a reaction based on movement. They get a plus 2 status bonus to all of their defenses against that reaction. So this is a cool new option. Speed is king in this game and lets you be more of a leader and protector of your allies. Now let's get to the subclasses, the causes for the champion. We start with the holy ones, the ones that require you to be sanctified and holy. The first one is brand new. It's called Grandeur, and I think it's kind of a funny one. You basically talk about how beautiful good things are and bring humility to others because they're not as beautiful. One of your edicts is that you must keep yourself tidy and well-groomed. So God forbid you going into the mud. Like the champion's reactions you probably are familiar with, both the enemy and your ally who's being damaged by that enemy must both be within 15 feet of you or here within your champion's aura. You reduce the damage, as before. 2 plus your level is subtracted from all damage. That means it's applied separately against each damage type. Then for 1 round, the attacker is affected by the Revealing Light spell. Revealing Light is the remaster version of Glitter Dust and Fairy Fire. It makes that foe dazzled, so everyone is concealed to it. That's quite an effective debuff on their attacks. And if they were invisible, they are merely concealed, as they are revealed. It also makes concealed foes not concealed. At level 9, all champions get Relentless Reaction, which improves their reaction. For the Grandeur champions, it applies persistent spirit damage equal to your Charisma modifier, and it cannot go away if they're still affected by the Revealing Light from your reaction. At level 11, all champions get an Exalted Reaction affecting other creatures, and now your reaction affects all enemies within your aura. They all get the effect of Revealing Light. The other holy cause is the Redemption cause, and this is our holdover from the previous neutral good champion called the Redeemer. It looks pretty much unchanged from before, giving the enemy a choice of doing no damage or becoming enfeebled 2 until the end of its next turn, while its damage is still reduced by you. The only difference is that at level 9 it gets persistent spirit damage instead of good damage from before. And we'll see this theme. A lot of these causes that before applied persistent damage that was alignment damage now becomes spirit damage. So they now affect a broader group of creatures. However, because you're sanctified, your spirit damage takes on the holy trait as well and will likely trigger weaknesses against a variety of creatures. By the way, a lot of these level 9 Relentless Reaction abilities from these causes deal spirit damage, and they gain the holy or unholy trait depending on if you're sanctified. Everything else looks otherwise the same. Okay, now we go to the causes that I call the agnostic causes. These causes are ones that you can take up regardless of whether you are sanctified or not. First is the Justice cause, and this is very similar to what our Lawful Good Paladin has in the previous champion. They get Retributive Strike, they get to reduce damage to their ally and strike the enemy. Interestingly, this means that champions who previously we would call evil characters now can take up the Justice cause and have access to Retributive Strike themselves. And at level 9, it applies a generic spirit damage, which can be holy, unholy, or neither. Everything else is otherwise the same as before. All right, the next cause is Liberation. This is our old chaotic good Liberation champion. But now any champion can take up this cause. This is the reaction Liberating Step that not only reduces damage on an ally, but can help them resist or break free from a grapple or a restraint, and gives them a free step. This is pretty much unchanged from what existed before, except that the level 11 Exalted reaction, the one that gave all your allies within your champion's aura a free step, their free action no longer requires your ally you are protecting to refrain from breaking free or escaping from a restraint. Okay, now one of the lauded things about the Remastered Champion is that you supposedly are able to mix and match a lot of deities with different causes. And by rule, any champion can take up one of these agnostic causes. However, I'm going to point out that, at least in my games, I will not allow certain worshippers of certain deities to take up some of these causes, and I'm going to bring up Asmodeus. Asmodeus, the Prince of Darkness, has as one of his edicts to rule tyrannically and torture weaker beings. However, that seems incompatible with being a liberation champion for obvious reasons, and one of its edicts says explicitly that you must oppose tyranny. All right, so we have Asmodeus, who says you must rule tyrannically, and the Liberation Cause, which says you must oppose tyranny. So it's not cut and dry as one would think at first. All right, the last agnostic cause is obedience, and this is the natural fit for our Asmodeus worshipper. This used to be our lawful evil tyrant. Their reaction Iron Command is essentially unchanged. This is our first reaction we're seeing today that does not reduce damage. What it does is it punishes a foe who dares to damage you. For their impertinence, you command them to either bend the knee, basically they fall prone in game terms, and if they refuse, they'll take mental damage to their brain. Regardless of what they do, you do extra spirit damage to them with your strikes until the end of your next turn. The rest is similar to what the Tyrant had before. Now, I don't know if this is one of the stronger champion reactions, but it's really cool. Now we get on to the juicy unholy causes. These require that you sanctify as unholy, which, remember, is an uncommon option. It is very disruptive in most games. We have two of them. The first one is Desecration. This is our old neutral evil Desecrator champion. Their reaction is the same. It's called Selfish Shield. You reduce damage against yourself, not your allies. You get to deal extra spirit damage to them until the end of your next turn with your strikes. The rest is similar to what existed before. The last one is Iniquity, which is our old chaotic evil anti-paladin, which was a horrible name. Anti-paladin, like, what kind of name is that? Do we say anti-barbarian? This has the cool reaction where you accept more damage in order to deal more damage to that enemy, and it's spirit damage that you deal to them. Like with all of these causes, whatever spirit damage you deal takes on the holy or unholy trait when you deal it, and here, of course, you are unholy. So extra damage to angels and the very good-hearted. In addition, until the end of your next turn, your strikes against the triggering creature deal 2 extra spirit damage. It's actually double what the Desecration one would be getting. Before the remaster, this capped at 2, but now it scales up at higher levels. The rest is the same as before, with that caveat, of course, that if it did alignment damage before, it now does spirit damage. All right, now we would go on to the feats now, but I apologize, I'm not able to do a full review of each class, just too much real-life work in the way. I'll just point out that I did catch some discussion online about how one of the feats is particularly strong. It's level 12 Blessed Counterstrike. I'll just say what it does. It has the Flourish trait, and if you have a champion's reaction that grants an ally resistance to an enemy's damage, then if an enemy triggered your champion's reaction since your last turn, you can, as an action, do a weapon strike against it, and you deal 1 extra weapon damage die. So it's kind of like Vicious Swing, formerly called Power Attack, where you do an extra die of damage, but instead of costing 2 actions, it only costs you 1 action. And now, on top of that, if you hit with this strike, then until the start of your next turn, the target gains weakness equal to half your level to all strikes made by you and your allies. So this is great for piling on the damage against a single foe, especially if you have more martial allies who can attack with strikes. I don't know if I would call it overpowered. It is strong, though. However, I don't know if it should be limited to the quote-unquote good causes. This idea of punishing your foes for their transgressions seems like it shouldn't be walled off to the bad, evil, unholy kind of causes to me. You don't need an ally to be hit to be pissed off. But beyond that, if you want to deep dive into the feats for the champion, there is a video out there by BadLuckGamer where they go over all of the feats one by one, starting at the 30-minute mark. I'll have a link in the video description. Lastly, I'll briefly touch on the archetype for the champion. Before, it was seen as a very strong archetype that gave you heavy armor proficiency and also 2 skills. And I'll point people to a video by SwingRipper where he does talk about that. In a video about the free archetype variant where he points out that it does give a significant boost at some tables to character power. I'll have a link to that in the video description too. Well, with the remaster, it's still strong. It doesn't give you heavy armor proficiency anymore, however. It only gives you medium armor proficiency. You have to already have medium armor proficiency to get heavy armor proficiency. So the Ranger and the Alchemist can still get heavy armor from this archetype. So that is a debuff. However, at the same time, it now auto-scales. Before, you had to take a level 14 champion feat that would increase your proficiency from your dedication to expert. Now, this auto-scales and gives you expert proficiency at level 13. So overall, it is still quite a strong archetype in this game. It still gives you a champion's reaction at level 6. So that's my coverage of the Remastered Champion. I don't have many final thoughts except that it's very welcome that you can now mix and match different causes with different deities much more than before. And I like the greater options for your devotion spell also. It's nice to have mounts at level 1, which before, if you wanted your divine mount, you had to wait until level 3. All of the champion strikes being holy or unholy if you're sanctified is a buff. And the shield ally has been nerfed, and I think it was probably too strong before, but its reduction now to, well, for those who are investing in their shields, to giving you +1 to hardness, I'm not sure that is worth it. I do wonder if maybe that should at least scale up a little bit as you get into higher levels. So support my channel by liking and subscribing, and also ring the bell if you want to get notified about my next videos covering the remastered classes. Make sure to support my Patreon and also join my Discord where we talk Pathfinder 2e and other gaming, and you can also play Pathfinder there. We have a drop-in, drop-out organized play system called Endless Tale Tavern. So that's it. I have been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'll see you next time.